the 2016 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. The Republican race for the 3rd Congressional District.
Good evening. I'm Celeste Headlee, host of On Second Thought for Georgia Public Broadcasting. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from GPB Studios in Atlanta. This is the runoff debate among the Republican candidates in Georgia's 3rd Congressional District. The 3rd Congressional District covers most of west central Georgia. It includes Carroll, Coweta, Meriwether, and part of Fayette. So let's meet the candidates. They are in alphabetical order. Mike Crane, a state senator and licensed general contractor in Georgia who also owns his own construction company. And Drew Ferguson is a family dentist and the former mayor of his hometown, West Point, Georgia. And so, let's meet our panelists. Maggie Lee is a freelance print reporter specializing in state and metro Atlanta government and politics. Winston Skinner is the news editor for the Newnan Times-Herald. And Chuck Williams is senior reporter for the Columbus Ledger-Enquirer. Tonight's debate will consist of 3 rounds. If you want more information on the rules for each round, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website. It's atlantapressclub.org. So, let's get started. In the first round, each candidate will be asked one question by one of our panelists. Candidates have 60 seconds to answer that question. Winston, you get the first question, and it goes to Mike Crane.
Yes, thank you, Celeste. Mr. Crane, your remarks about no-knock warrants have been a central issue in this campaign, and of course some comments that you made at a meeting in Newnan have been televised numerous times for us to see and hear. If you were at that meeting again, is there anything you would say differently in explaining your position?
You know, what's interesting, Winston, is the fact that it's become a central issue in the campaign. My comments were made in a room that to a group of folks that I think speak for themselves. What we would want to say in that is I think everybody has the right to defend their home and feel protected in their home. And I would ask folks, this would be the thing I would ask people. At what point does government have the right, or anyone have the right, to enter your home unannounced? And so that's the whole debate. It wasn't about how you react at that point, but the big question honestly is, Winston, are no-knock warrants legal under the Constitution? And that's what the whole question should resound about. If you look at the mailers from the opponent, they don't talk about the no-knock issue at all. And so I would like to frame the debate around that issue particularly. Are no-knock warrants legal under the Constitution?
Thank you very much. Chuck, you get the next question, and it goes to Drew Ferguson.
Along the same line, Mayor Ferguson, with all the issues facing people in the 3rd Congressional District in Georgia, why has your campaign seized on his comments about no-knock warrants and law enforcement?
Well, first of all, I was at that meeting, and the context of that conversation was certainly framed around no-knock warrants and a judge issuing those warrants and Mike's reaction to police officers coming to his house. In this day and age, this is an important issue for citizens in the 3rd District of Georgia. It's an important issue for our nation. At no point is it acceptable for an elected official to put a target on the backs of our police officers. No matter the context of the conversation, it is irresponsible and dangerous to say it's okay to shoot police officers, law enforcement officers of any type, and encourage others to do it. It's not responsible, and we need to understand, and I think we do understand, that when law enforcement is attacked, it's an attack on all of us.
That concludes our first round. In the second round, the candidates will ask one question of each other. Each has 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond to the question you're asked, and then 30 seconds for rebuttal. By random selection, Drew Ferguson gets the first question.
Sure. Mike, can you please give a brief description of pilot bonds and why you are against local governments using them?
Well, what I'm against, Drew, is the fact that we think government should intervene in the marketplace and pick winners and losers. That government can reappropriate money from one segment of the economy to another without the approval of the taxpayers. I don't think the government helps business when it does that. It hinders business. The payment in lieu of taxes program, if you want to ask a question about it, the Kia plant, how much did West Point get from that? $6 million? As far as that goes?
As far as a pilot bond goes?
Yes. Well, no, their payment in lieu
It's
of
been-
taxes payments were, what, $900,000 a year?
It's been significant. The entire program has been significantly more than that.
Well, the question might be, what does the city of West Point do with that money once they've taken it? And then why isn't the money going into the general coffers instead? When you start
We'll
dealing
have to
with,
leave it there. So, 30-second rebuttal.
Sure. Well, first of all, Mike, that is a constitutional authority that we have in West Point through our West Point Development Authority to utilize a very unique program, using pilot bonds. And to answer your question, I'll tell you exactly what we did with those funds. We actually lowered taxes. Taxes were lower the day that I left office than when I stopped it, than when I took office. We created thousands upon thousands of jobs. We revitalized the downtown. We made our city footprint smaller in terms of local government. We did our job by creating a strong
And
local
that is
economy.
time. So, Mike Crane, it is now your turn to ask a question of Mr. Ferguson.
I guess if we go back to the first question, that the issue in the campaign about no-knock warrants, you turned a discussion within a group of people where I was directing my comments to a group of people where I mentioned to folks directly what I thought about the use of no-knock warrants, and you turned that into a hit piece, a campaign hit piece, where you lied about what I actually said. I never said or encouraged anyone to shoot police officers. Is that type of political hacking, is that what we should come to expect if Drew Ferguson becomes congressman?
Mike, I was at that meeting, and I heard what you said, and you meant it. The tape is there. There is no reason to call for violence against law enforcement officers at any time, no matter the context. Law enforcement are the people that are out there protecting us every single day. And it is irresponsible and dangerous to put a target on their back. You said yourself, this is an issue that you disagree with law enforcement on. I will continue to stand with law enforcement. You can stand on the other side of that issue if you want to.
A 30-second rebuttal.
Well, so your answer to, will you use lies and distortions in your campaign to advance your cause at no cost? What's troubling about that is I said my comments in a closed room to a closed group of people using the pronoun you. And so I never mentioned law enforcement officers directly. I didn't say they. But you turned that in. What I said one time, you and all your Chamber of Commerce supporters has blanketed that vitriol and that incendiary
And that is
comment,
time.
which is a lie.
For those just joining us, this is the runoff debate between the Republican candidates in Georgia's 3rd Congressional District. We'll now go to our third and final round. In this round, each panelist will ask a question to the candidate of his or her choice until we run out of time. I will determine when a rebuttal is appropriate and needed. So, Maggie, you get the first question.
Sure. I have a question for Mike Crane, who was a Ted Cruz supporter, a Ted Cruz ally. We've just watched Donald Trump give his big debut speech as the GOP presidential nominee. What in that speech might have resonated with you, or maybe what didn't resonate with you?
Donald's speech last
Yes.
night? Maggie, I have to be honest with you. We were at a campaign event till 11:30 last night, and I didn't get to hear it yet. What I'm encouraged about what I have heard from Donald Trump so far is the leadership he's going to bring to this country. It's a whole different style of leadership than we're used to from the establishment. And you use the word, if we're going to be picking on words and how they're used, you said I was a supporter of Ted Cruz. No, I am a supporter of Ted Cruz. He's a fine man, a strong constitutionalist, and he's fighting for every American's freedom and liberty. And I believe Donald Trump's going to do the same thing. He is the guy to vote for in November. He's the guy I will be voting for in November, and I encourage everyone else to do so.
Okay, Winston, it's your turn.
Mr. Ferguson,
Yes.
The population in the 3rd District and in the United States as a whole is getting older. What are your views on the long-term future of Social Security and Medicare?
Well, first of all, I think that the most important thing that we do is the dollars that are paid into that system, they should be segregated and they should not be touched and used for other general programs. I think that is very, very important. I also believe that we need to involve the private sector in this. At any point in healthcare, whether it's Social Security, healthcare, anytime the government gets involved in it, the costs go up, the efficiencies go down. I believe that allowing individuals to make private sector decisions about their retirement is very important. It is a way to increase the sustainability of the program.
Chuck, it is now your turn to ask a question of either candidate.
I'd like to pose this to both of y'all, and I'll be very quick in how I ask it. But Fort Benning is not in the 3rd Congressional District. It sits just on the southern edge of it. But many soldiers, civil service employees, and retirees that live in the 3rd District depend on Fort Benning for their livelihoods and for their security. It is represented by a Democrat currently. How will you work with Democrats to ensure the economic and military viability of Fort Benning?
Mr. Crane, you can answer first.
Right. Well, Chuck, Fort Benning, like all of our military installations, are crucial to our national security. Congressional lines are just arbitrary lines that just appear on a map somewhere. But at the end of the day, we're all Americans, and we need to, first and foremost, through a constitutional framework, make sure that our national defense is the strongest it absolutely can be. I'll work hand in hand with all of our congressional delegation to make sure that Fort Benning stays secure and is one of the prominent military installations in our country. So I look forward to supporting every effort to maintain and grow the effectiveness of our installation in Columbus.
Mr. Ferguson.
Defending our national interest and having a strong military knows no party bounds. Working with a Democrat, Republicans, working with our Georgia delegation will be important to make sure that Fort Benning stays in a leadership position. As other bases are closed, we have to fight very, very hard to make sure that funding is in place for Fort Benning and the Columbus region. You mentioned that it's not in the 3rd District. However, it is so close, we all have to take ownership of that. A strong national defense is vitally important to securing American interests around the globe. And Fort Benning is a strategic part of that national defense. And we will work extremely hard with whoever we have to in Congress, Republicans and Democrats, but most importantly, the Georgia delegation, to make sure that stays extremely viable in the West Georgia region.
Maggie, we come back to you. Another question.
Sure. I'd like to ask the same question to Drew Ferguson. We've just seen Donald Trump give his big debut speech as the Republican nominee. What in his speech resonated with you, or what maybe didn't resonate with you?
I think last night Mr. Trump did a remarkable job of outlining the problems that we have in America, clearly hanging those problems around the necks of the Democrats. And I think he showed incredibly strong leadership and determination to fight for every single American. I think that his message of putting America first, being strong, and making sure that every part of this nation is doing well will resonate with Americans on any day.
Winston, a question for either candidate.
Yes, for Mr. Crane. Businesses in Coweta County and in the 3rd District are seeing a stronger and better economic climate, but many of them are still struggling following the events of the last few years. If you're elected to Congress, what would you do to help make sure that businesses start, grow, and prosper in our district?
Well, Coweta is particularly well situated. Much of the 3rd District is with our interstate system, and we've got a very vibrant and growing economy, especially in Newnan with the Cancer Treatment Centers of America and their impact on our community. That was done without any taxpayer assistance, by the way. What we need to do to make sure every part of the 3rd District and every part of this nation thrives is reduce the government bureaucracy that we have to interact with as businesses, as a business owner, every day. I'm kind of sick and tired of having to ask permission from government to do things, to live my life, what I should believe, what I shouldn't believe. And I think the rest of the American people are tired of that too. So at the federal level, we need to roll back the bureaucracy. We need to roll back many of the increases in the bureaucratic structure that President Obama has foisted on the American people, and we can get back to the business of business.
Okay, Chuck, a question.
This is for Senator Crane. You've defined your opponent as too liberal for this job. Define liberal.
Those weren't, I don't think any of that really came from me, if I recall correctly. That may have come from some other organizations painting him one characteristic. I would probably characterize him more as an establishment candidate if I was going to pick the phraseology today. And I've defined that by somebody who actually is more beholden to big business, Chamber of Commerce influence, and a structure that is not based on we the people. I want to restore the we the people part of the Constitution that seems to be grossly missing nowadays.
Mr. Ferguson, a 30-second rebuttal?
Sure. To characterize me as a member of the establishment is absolutely disingenuous. I've been the mayor of my hometown and a practicing dentist for the last 24 years. And Mike, for you to stand up here and keep trying to push on the Chamber of Commerce issue when the Club for Growth has basically run your campaign. They have managed every part of it and spent almost $800,000 on your behalf. They simply own you when you go, if you were to go to Washington.
Okay, Maggie, do you have a question for either candidate?
Yeah, I have a question for both candidates. Several states have experimented with legalizing either marijuana or medical marijuana. What do you think Congress should do?
You'll each get 1 minute. Let's start with Mr. Ferguson.
Sure. First thing they need to do is reschedule the drug. I think that allowing states to and other companies to explore medical uses for marijuana is a valid reason to do that. Listen, I don't think that recreational marijuana should ever be allowed. We have enough issues going on with that. But being able to extract the useful parts of that plant that helps so many thousands of children, I think is valid, and I think that we should pursue that.
Mr. Green.
Yes, I've been a part in the state legislature of trying to advance the accessibility of medical marijuana to our community in need. I've got personal friends who find great benefit to the efficacy of certain derivatives of marijuana for their children particularly, and I don't think the federal government or the state government should stand in the way of that. I am not a supporter of recreational use of marijuana. And I think at the federal level, we need to get the federal government out of the business of telling us what to do.
So I'm going to step in for just a moment because I do have a question for both of you, and we'll give each of you a minute to respond. Keeping in mind what's happened with the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, and especially Ted Cruz's appearance and the concern that some may have that Donald Trump may have a detrimental effect on down-ticket Republicans, I wonder what your concerns are about the ticket and for those who vote one-party ticket and whether the turmoil in the party may end up having detrimental effects for you. And I'll go first to Mr. Crane.
Well, I think Donald Trump's going to do a great job of unifying the party. From what I heard of the few comments I heard last night, that's his essence, and not just the party. It was all America. I think he's going to attract a lot of folks to the polls that may not have gone before or don't go very frequently, and I believe that that's going to be good for all America. It's just our job in the meantime to make sure, as Senator Cruz said, that we're looking at candidates, particularly in this race and many others, the true constitutional conservatives that can be faithful to their obligation and their oath under their service to the nation, that oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. I think Trump's got his work cut out for him, but I think he's going to do a great job of moving people in the right direction. We're going to need a Republican Senate to embrace his Supreme Court nominees, and I'm looking forward to having that.
Mr. Ferguson, you have 1 minute.
Well, you know, in my opinion, what Senator Cruz did not do says an awful lot about him. He did not endorse Donald Trump. He did not come out and support Donald Trump, and he did not honor his pledge to do so. He basically, by saying, vote your conscience, vote for somebody else other than Donald Trump, he basically endorsed Hillary Clinton. He divided the party. He had an opportunity to step up and do the right thing, and he didn't do it. Ted Cruz's ego and his desire to run for president in 2020 is not as important as the Supreme Court justices. We have to elect Donald Trump president. What we cannot do is allow Supreme Court justices to be appointed, liberal Supreme Court justices to be appointed by Hillary Clinton.
Thank you very much. Winston, it's your turn to ask a question.
Sure. For Mr. Ferguson.
Yes.
The country has been roiled with terrorist acts and random crime that's led to multiple deaths in recent months. What do you see Congress doing to address this societal problem in a timely way?
Well, first of all, we have to identify our enemy coming from the outside, and that is radical Islamic terrorism. And we must have a national policy, defense policy, that singles out that enemy and goes and destroys it. And part of that will be having a secure border. We cannot allow people that wish to do us harm into this nation. It's not mean-spirited. It's common sense. We have to protect ourselves here in this nation, and we can do that with proper border enforcement and American policy that promotes American exceptionalism around the world, and by having a strong defense to defend those principles and freedoms.
Chuck?
This is for both of y'all. It can be a very short answer, but endorsements have been coming down in this race almost daily. Which endorsement are each of you most proud of?
Let's start with you, Mr. Crane.
Well, I was waiting for yours, Chuck. Honestly, my endorsement that I'm most proud of is from the voters. They put us in first place in the original primary, and I'm just encouraging them to get back to the polls and support us. So I think that's the one at the end of the day that matters most.
Mr. Ferguson?
Chuck, I would say the collection of endorsements that we have says a lot about this campaign. From the sheriffs that have endorsed me to the 5 other candidates that win the race, to Lynn Westmoreland, to Sonny Perdue, to Johnny Isaacson, folks that have been conservative champions for the state of Georgia and for this nation. I'm proud of all of those, and I believe that people that are trying to make a decision about this race many of those will look at those endorsements and say that may be the thing that puts me on Drew's side. So we're proud of those endorsements. They all mean an awful lot to us.
We have time for one more question, and I'm going to ask it to keep everything even. If you have 1 minute, but tell me what your number one legislative priority would be were you to attain office. And let me start with Mr. Ferguson.
It is to have a laser-focused effort at reviving our American economy based on strong manufacturing. We have to have comprehensive tax reform. We have to rein in the regulatory environment of the federal government that is adding cost after cost after cost and crushing our business community. We must remove the federal government from the education model and return that to the states and the local communities so that they can develop programs to educate children to meet the needs of the jobs that will be created. If we don't have a strong national economy, our families hurt, our communities fail, and we're unable to defend ourselves. Reviving the economy is the number one priority.
Okay, Mr. Crane, 1 minute.
To restore constitutionally limited federal government. And that governance, if everybody would get back in their lanes from the judicial branch to the executive branch and most especially Congress, if everybody would operate within their confines of their constitutional parameters, all these other things fix themselves. We would operate with a balanced budget. We would not have the massive federal government that we have right now that intrudes on every single sector of our lives. I ask people all the time if they can name one part of their life that the federal government doesn't intrude on. And no one can answer that question because they're into every part of our lives. If we return and restore a constitutionally limited government, that will come from leadership, that'll come from proactive legislation that reins in the out-of-control abuses of power at the executive and even judiciary levels, and the weakness that the Congress has shown so far. It's time to make that change. I'm excited. I think Donald Trump is going to help lead the way on that, and we'd love to be there to help him do it.
Well, that is all the time that we have for questions. Each candidate now gets 60 seconds for a closing statement. Drew Ferguson, you get the first closing statement.
The thing that I enjoy and love most about being an American are my freedoms. The freedoms to live my life and worship the way that I would like to. But those freedoms are under attack from a variety of sources, both internally but most importantly externally. If we do not defend our American ideals and freedoms around the world, we will lose them. In order to do that, we must have American policy that promotes exceptionalism and American greatness around the world, and we cannot apologize for that. In order to defend that, we must have a strong military. In order to fund a military in a sustainable way, we must have a strong national economy. Reviving our national economy is vital to restoring and defending American values around the world. I will be focused on that, and I ask for your vote on July the 26th. Thank you.
Mike Crane, you can now give your closing remarks.
The good folks of the 3rd District have a unique opportunity, a rare opportunity that usually comes along once in a generation, and that is to have a choice in the direction of the future of our nation. I present the option where we can divert from where we're headed. We can get off the path to destruction, and we can get back on track to restoring this great nation. There are 2 clear choices here. I don't know that they could be any more distinct than they are, but I would encourage you to look at my service record in the Senate, my consistent voting record in the Senate, no matter what the pressures come to bear. Washington's no different than the Georgia legislature, and it's going to take somebody with principled convictions based in the Constitution that make us get back on track and headed toward where we need to be as America. I ask for your vote, I ask for your support, and I encourage you, get out on Tuesday and vote for Mike Crane. Thank you.
So that concludes our debate. We would like to remind voters the primary elections will be held on Tuesday, July 26th. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging tonight's debate. If you want more information about the Atlanta Press Club, visit atlantapressclub.org. I'm Celeste Headlee. Thank you so much for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Good night.